Welcome to the Art Lady channel. Today I'm going to show you some images of Henri Rousseau's jungle, and I'm going to teach you how to make plants in the foreground. And then there'll be another video on middle ground and background for this series of Henri Rousseau jungle series. And once you've done the jungle series, what I do with my students is I give them a really large sheet of paper, and then as we hit each composition or each subject, they place it anywhere they want on their page. For example, if they're going to be doing the foreground, anywhere on the foreground they can place it. And then when we do the background or middle ground, they can place it anywhere in their background and middle ground, and then they'll come up with a jungle composition that's all their own. And you can also repeat each of these elements over and over again as much as you would like. As you can see here, Henri Rousseau repeated these giant flowers at least 3 times. And then we have in the foreground here, we have a row of these lilies that are repeated. But what I'm going to do is teach you how to make one of them, and then on your own, you can repeat them to your own composition. So we're going to be focusing on today foreground. So we're going to be looking at things in Henri Rousseau's foreground. So on this video, everything that we're going to be placing in my art class is going to be in the foreground. Another plant that Henri Rousseau used often in his foreground are these snake plants here. You can see here they are a clumping plant that grows together, and they're pretty tough plants. And they're outlined in a yellow, green, or a brighter color. And in the middle there is a darker value green. So sometimes the snake plants almost look yellow or yellow-green on the outside, or even some light white almost I've seen at some point, depending on the nutrients they're getting. And then the centers are always darker, dark green or a neutral value or medium value green. But that's a foreground plant. Here's another cool lily actually too. These large fancy lilies. It's right near his signature there. That gorgeous giant lily. But we're going to go ahead and start, and I'll show you the plants as we go along. The first one I'm going to go ahead and show you is, why don't we start off with this giant gorgeous plant here, the white flower, I will call it. So anywhere on your page, and if you hold your page horizontally, then you'll have plenty of room to add all the foreground plants to. And you can decide wherever you'd like to place it. I'm just going to place mine in one of the corners here. And I'm going to start off pretty large. So if here's my halfway point, top, bottom of the page, I'm going to go, here's my center, a little bit lower than the center here. And I'm going to go ahead and do a straight line. And we're exaggerating these. So these are going to be thicker than normal. And that's what Rousseau did. He exaggerated these in his fantasy jungle pictures. He based a lot of his information off of real life plants and then simplified the drawings and then of course exaggerated a lot of characteristics of them, whether it be size or color. Now we're going to go ahead and do some heart-shaped leaves up the sides. And the leaves, if you look, they come off symmetrically here. See how they are symmetrical, same on both sides of the stem, and they come from a center point here. So I'm going to decide where I want my leaves to come, and then basically I'm just going to put a heart on each side. So if you want to turn this like this, you can draw a capital letter A. This is a simplified version of a heart. And then I come out from the stem here, and I'm just going to come down and around to meet the other side. If you want to make a heart this way, that's fine too. Up and around, and then come down to form your V. Try and get them similar on both sides. So you can make it upside down, however's more comfortable for you. If you feel that you like making your heart this way, that's fine. Or if you want to do it the way I did it with the capital letter A, if you're having trouble making a heart, and then coming down and up to meet. That's up to you. And you can add as many leaves. Now, I don't particularly have any more room or for another set of leaves. I'm going to go ahead and start off on the flower now. And for the flower, I'm going to come up. Let me give it a little bit more height here. I'm going to come up a little bit. Now I'm going to do a dip. It's going to dip down and over. So I have a slight dip curve. And then I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to give a guideline up here, which is about a finger's width. Now I'm just going to taper it down slowly and taper this down slowly. If it does not meet, then go ahead and just make it meet. So that's one of the petals. Now I'm going to do the opposite petal. So I'm going to dip down. I'm following this curve, down and up. Now I want to do the same thing. I want to do it about a finger. And then I'm just going to taper it, meaning to curve down so that it forms a point, curving gently down, almost like a slide. Now I'm going to do the center flower part of this. So if you look here, that's the yellow part on the flower. So it's almost like a curve, like a cupcake curve almost, up and back, or a rainbow arch. Now I want some of the petals, and these flowers consist of 4 petals. So I'm going to come up about a finger, put a dot, and on this side, put a dot. Now I'm going to have a petal on one side and a petal on the other. So I'm going to taper down on both sides. It almost forms like a letter A. Then I'm curving just gently to the center. Now the same on this side, but this will be behind this one. So I'm going to come down and stop at the petal. I'm going to make it a little bit taller, and then curve, a slight curve to meet there. And now I have that flower. Now, once you know how to make this flower, you can repeat this, like I said, on your paper as many times as you want to. A good rule of thumb is in groupings of 3, like Rousseau did, or 5 or 7. Usually artists will go with odd numbers when it has something like this. Just 1 kind of looks a little, even though 1 is an odd number, 1 flower would kind of look lonely, so the grouping of 3 is what artists usually go by. But I'm going to go ahead and show you some other things now. The next item I'm going to show you is the snake plant. Right here. And this is done in, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, grouping of 5 here. And this is done, it kind of reminds me of almost like a fan, the way it fans out from a center area. See how they grow? They grow in clumps, and they have underground tubers, which are roots that grow underground. So let's start off with one single one first. I'm going to give the height. I want it to be here. And these are long and skinny. They are pointy at the top, come down and slightly out as you go right to the bottom of the page. Now I want it to be very skinny and pointy, and then I'm going to slowly get wider. So let's make this about a finger's width, mark it at the bottom, and now I'm going to just come skinny, skinny, keep it skinny and slowly get wider until you reach the bottom here. Now you have an option. You can put the color on the inside, or you can have the outline come up and around. What I mean is depending on how you want to make this, you can make it even bigger or smaller. So I could have just drawn the outline of this, or I could have just drawn the inside. So let's make this the inside. And then I'm going to just do the same. I'm going to kind of like trace edge, but leave a thick band. So I'm forming that band around the snake plant of that color. So now I get a bigger leaf. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the grouping of them. So I want my snake plant to, and you want to adjust the heights. If you look, they don't all end at the same height. Some are taller. Let me show you on this one. It's hard to see with this glare. It's an overhead transparency here. Some are a little bit taller, and then one curves out. So I'm going to vary the height because variation is important. So I'll do one here. So I'm bringing it down to meet the plant and down to meet the edge of the page here, the bottom of the page. And then I'm going to put my inside color in. I'm going to make this one almost the same height, just a little bit smaller. Dot, bring it down, and then bring it down, and then fill in the inside. You want this band to be equal as it comes around. And then I'll add another one on this side. This one will be pretty much behind this. And then I'll do the band. And then one more, because like I said, I like groups of 5 or 7. There. So there's our snake plant. And now I'm going to show you how to make this really cool kind of coppery red plant here. And this is very similar to the one that we just did with the flower, except this one doesn't have the flower. This coppery red one. So give yourself a stem. And then we're going to come out with a leaf at the top, which is almost like a letter A, capital letter A. Then I'm going to curve out, and back to the stem. So this is a tapered leaf that's kind of a wide belly. I call this the belly. It's a wide belly tapered leaf. And it branches out just like the heart shapes, but instead of being heart shaped, it is just rounded. So I'm going to give myself a area where they connect. I'm going to round and then taper the top. Kind of like a teardrop shaped leaf. Round and taper. However you want to form this, what's easy for you. Curve, curve, and then this is like your sideways V, or it could be, you could say it's a greater than or less than sign. Come out. I prefer to do it the curve and then this part. The curve and then taper. I like to give it a little bit of a... And then you can have these tilt different ways too. Let me show you how Rousseau did it. And he had them overlapping each other. So you can draw a plant in the background behind this one. But look, you want to make sure that when you draw one, you're overlapping those leaves. So your leaf, so this didn't have to look so perfectly in line. Let me show you some, if they maybe tip up a little bit, they can overlap some. See that? So you can vary this, because a variation in art is one of our terms, our principles, and the elements and principles, and that is important in art, variation. You don't want it to be all exactly the same, because then it becomes, you know, not as interesting. There. Okay, so you can overlap like he did. Now another item that is in the foreground, let's do this really cool. We'll stick a bud, because here's a bud on a flower, and then one of these giant flowers. Very similar to this flower. Okay, so let's get a bud. I'm just going to stick a bud stem behind here. And a bud is just simply a curve like the letter U. And then I bring this back and bring this back. And then I'm forming a pointed A right there. And there's a bud. And of course, put as many in as you want. And then I'm going to show you a flower. I'm just going to stick it right in here. So I want a stem, come up, and I'm going to slightly curve. Now you can put yours anywhere you want to. And then I'm going to do a slight line here, slight line here. Kind of looks like a large bowl. These are pointy on the end. And then it's slightly tapered here. They're not as fat as this flower. Pointy, okay? Now I'm gonna, it's kind of like a lotus flower. That's what these look like. Now I'm gonna slightly curve up like a bowl, like it's forming a bowl here. And then I'm gonna come taper it down. So you want this to be pointy on the tip, taper it down, pointy on the tip, come around and down. The center one, skinny, That can be the center. And then I'll put some smaller ones in the back. Skinny, small letter A, capital letter A's. Bring it down, bring it down. Just connect them. Small letter A. Now notice, I'm lower than this one. Small letter A, connect it, just like that. And it forms like a lotus flower. All right, and that is simple foreground plants for Henri Rousseau.